Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about drops on the pubg Russian island map. There has been a lot of speculation about how many possible drops for squads there are. I believe there is at least 30 and I'm going to outline them today on this map. We're going to go ahead and drop right in, and I believe the first spot we can talk about is the Zarki location. Now, the Zarki location has good loot for 4 people. There are 4 different entry points I would have a squad drop in to get the optimal amount of loot. The first person can start in the northeast section. The second person can start in the northwest section. One person can start in the middle, and one person can start at the bottom of this hill. So there are 4 possible drop points on this to start looting. There is also a secondary spot for one person to branch off to if they feel it's risky enough, and that would be down here, and then join in with the team. There are multiple locations to find a vehicle in this area. One location is right in town here, another in town here, another in town here, on this road, on this road, on this road, and further up this road. So once you receive loot, the hardest part about transitioning from Zarki to the main island is a vehicle, and as you can see, there are a lot of drop points for cars around Zarki. So we will label Zarki as the first spot. The second spot on this island would be Severny, and there is 2 ways to do Severny. One, all 4 people can drop in Severny, with one person at the cafe, one person in the northwest corner, one person in the southwest corner barn, and one person in the southeast. Now, if you're in the circle, this won't really provide optimal amount of loots, so there are 2 strategies. Whoever loots the northeast corner or southeast corner gets a vehicle and travels up to this complex here. And by doing that, they get a lot more loot for them. The other option that we can do is not have all 4 people drop in Severny. What they can do is branch out, have 2 people drop in Severny here, and have 2 people split and do the gun range, the west bunker, and the east bunker. Now, normally as you drive in, one person goes this way with a teammate, and one person goes this way, and as you go this way, you drop somebody off at the east bunker, you loot the gun range, this person transitions over to west bunker, they loot that, and then you head back into Severny and group up and trade loot. There's also the option of these good 4 houses here, which are not too far, and can provide pretty adequate loot for somebody who needs a little bit more and has less than everyone else. Severny is the second spot. The next spot, which is a little bit less popular, but I have seen to work well for my squad, is the Stalber area. And I do not mean 4 people drop Stalber. That would be a total waste of time. What instead they should do is split up on the drop. So one person would take Stalber, one person would head up here, one person would try to get these buildings here, and then one person would try to get these buildings. Now there's a lot of cars on this road. There's a lot of cars on this road. There's cars on this dirt road here and here. And that would give you adequate loot. Now the only thing you need to worry about is this place, because as you know, people from Severny might try to loot this pound. And then there is the Yasnaya compound, which if people are dropping Yasnaya, they probably will not be dropping here first. So if you can get there quickly, you can usually steal that loot as well as here. So that allows for one drop all on its own. I've gotten pretty good rifles, vehicles, meds, and all kind of sorts of stuff. It's a little bit harder, but if you're quick on the transition, you should be able to adequately loot those areas in the northeast. Now, the next area I want to talk about is Yasnaya. Obviously, you have people dropping in Yasnaya, so when you're in with a squad and you see another squad, you're going to want to divert. If you're the first down, I like to drop on these apartments. These apartments have elevation that sees the rest of the city, allows you to loot in peace, and the ability to hear or see people coming in. So this is the safest area to start to get your primary first gun, second gun, maybe a helmet, armor, and a backpack. If there's no one in Yasnaya, then the most obvious thing to do is to take the high priority loot buildings. And where are the high priority loot buildings? They are these two double doubles. Two people would loot these. One person would loot the single pair of double doubles in the background, and one person would hit the cafe here, the diner, some people call it. Now, the cafe is really good loot, but what's also really good loot is this building just north of it and just east. So once all four people have looted these areas, it's important to start to maximize your loot. One person who looted the double doubles goes north and loots this. This person transitions to barn and then heads down to loot all these compounds. The other person, the double double, heads south to this barn and starts to loot these houses here, while the person at the cafe starts to head east and if there's time, would take the library and police station located here. Now what this strategy does is allows you to stay close to each other in case somebody rolls up in a vehicle or decides to walk in. If you can spot an enemy, you're only about 100 to 200 meters from your teammates to group up, which is very important as numbers make a big difference. Now, if you are late to Yasnaya and you see someone taking the back right apartments, which I had located here, then the second option is to split and stay safe. Now, this road is the largest amount of area in which you can see people. So if you see people north, you're going to want your whole team to stay south, and you're going to want to stay clustered up. The secondary strat I had would be to go here, 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 and here. Now there's a natural spawn car here, and there's a natural spawn car here, which is exit strategies in case there's too many teams and you need to bail. There's also a lot of cars at this gas station here. So if you need to run, this is your backup strategy here. Now, if there is an area in which you need to have a third drop because of the contention, which I don't recommend, then you would have two people loot the library and two people at the police station, and then head east along this road or to the next compound or down and get a car and just bail out after you get primary loot there. So I think three teams could loot Yasnaya without running into each other if you're smart about when to leave after you have some loot. So Yasnaya would be the fourth, fifth, and sixth place to receive loot. Now this area is very interesting because there is a lot of opportunities here for multiple teams. One team can loot Lipovka with four people. It's a little tight on loot, but one person can also branch out to these buildings here and loot them. Or one person can branch out to these four houses and loot those, splitting the loot up in Lipovka to their teams. Now, obviously, one person wants to start at the hangar, one person wants to start at the cafe, and one person wants to start either at the top or bottom here. That would allow you the maximum amount of loot. The next loot strategy I like to do is to split in this area and have one person or two people go villa, which is also known as estate, and two people go crater. Now this will give you a pretty good amount of loot for each person, enough to have a fight, enough to have gear. What's important here is the transition. Now again, you need to be careful with these buildings, and with these buildings because Lipovka might also want to contest them. Now a lot of people like to go to the hangar here, except this hangar is usually in contention from a lot of other places, so I would never recommend less than two people go to the hangar at a time, especially after you loot primary loot, as it always runs into a lot of enemies. So after you do the split here, there's one other smaller split you can do, which I don't recommend, but if you have nothing else, this is a pretty good spot. Two people take the bunkers here, one person takes the compound here and the hangar here very early before other enemies would come, and one person takes these four houses. Now to split 2-1-1 is a little dangerous, but that should give each person enough loot to start moving to the next building and contest the next point for positioning. We are going to move back west, and we are going to talk about this area here. One strategy I do with my team is we have one person drop cottage, one person drop J building, one person drop hill, and one person drop on this compound here. Now this will give you enough loot again just to get your backpack, your armor, and your helmet. maybe a gun, maybe a rifle, but it's enough that you can group up, get a car, and start contention points early, such as the hangar, such as the apartment, such as the school, and you can take a very early fight and surprise people while they're still comfy looting or split up with their team. This strategy here requires an early movement to attack another squad and steal their loot. Rozhok, which is one of my least favorite cities, can have 1 to 2 squads, probably just one, and they would start kind of like the other cities. You start one in this corner, one on this hill, one at the bottom, and then one here. So these 4 people move into center together. So if someone were to run up, you guys would then be grouped with weapons and be ready to take a fight with the high ground. Another spot in this area is the school and apartments. Now, neither have enough loot for 4 people, so I always recommend 2 to go to school and 2 to go apartments. If this is contested and you see people dropping with you, then all 4 should either take school or apartments and be ready to fight the other team, or leave if you don't feel you have enough loot. Another strategy that I've noticed worked for me is to split in this large area here. Now you can do 2 people Watertown and 2 people Ruins, which is some good loot. One person loots ruins and then goes to these 5 houses. One person loots ruins and goes to these 2 houses. In Watertown, one person could start over here, but there's a car spawn here, which is usually pretty dangerous. So if they don't want to loot this area, you can have 2 people start in here. One person start in this compound, one person start in this compound, and both work inwards. Now, if you see that you're the only one in this area, I think the best thing to do is to split all 4 people up. And the way I have my team do that would be if one person goes to Watertown, one person ruins, one person this compound, and one person this compound, and these people look for a car on this road, and these people look for a car on this road, and they stay grouped after they loot their initial area. This would be something as if the plane was really far south and you wanted to just drop north of Pochinki and you knew there was no one around you. The next area I'd like to talk about is Georgepool. Now there is a lot going on in Georgepool. I think 4 teams could easily loot this area without having any fights taken. One team loots this area, one team loots this area, one team loots this area, one team loots the crates, and you could probably sneak another team down here at the hospital. So 5 teams could probably loot all of Georgepool without even having to fight each other and getting an equal amount of loot. So let's start on North Georgepool. If you're gonna drop, one person should always take the police stations to start, and one person should take the library to start. Now, the other 2 people, I recommend one person at these apartments, as apartments are really good on defense for hearing and seeing other people. And then I like to have one person start to loot this area here, and then transition to this area here. The police station takes around 2 to 3 minutes to loot. When they're done, they take this area. When library is done, he joins apartments and they finish looting apartments together, and that should be about your 4 minute mark. Now, you don't want to go too far east and run into another team. You don't want to go too far north, and you don't want to go too far south and get picked. So it's important to stay together. The next section of Georgepool I like would be right here. One person starts in this building and then loots these. One person starts in this apartment and then moves to these. One person starts in these and moves to these houses. And the 4th person starts on these apartments and then heads south and joins his teammate there. Now there's 2 doubles here, and there's 2 2-story buildings here, and those have pretty good loot and should be hit first to try to increase your chances at getting a vehicle in case somebody rolls up. I'm sorry, increase your chances to get a gun in case a vehicle rolls up and you need to take an early fight. So that is North Georgepool. If you're forced and have to stuck in the middle to start looting, I would recommend these 4 buildings just to start to try to get a gun and try to take an early fight to fight your way out if your hand is forced. In South Georgepool, we have a lot of areas here. Now, if you're coming from the south, I always like somebody dropping in on Hospital because that gives you great elevation for the whole city, and you can scout for your team out who's dropping in or who's driving in. You might want to have 2 people loot Hospital as it's large, and you need somebody on the south and north end. These hangars are very good, so one can drop on these hangars. And also, these 3 doubles should definitely be a high priority first loot, and these 6 doubles with a high priority loot also being this barn and these houses here. There's just a ton of loot for a lot of people in this small section. Now, if you see people dropping hospital or on these high priority double doubles, but you've already committed to North George Pool, my veer strat would be to loot this area here. Now, this area here is still pretty good for loot if you can sneak this building. That's got some good loot there too. And there's also two unmarked buildings here you can loot. This should give you enough loot just to get a fight, and there's lots of vehicle spawns here, or a boat to escape with whatever loot you can to get into the circle before the other team notices that you're even there. The other section, which I don't really recommend because it's a little bit difficult to loot, are these crates. Now, crates have loot underneath them, they have loot on top, they have loot inside the hangars, they have loot in the guard booths here. This is hard because you're really exposed and you don't get a lot of meds in the crates. If you have all of George Pool to yourself, you definitely want to put two people on crates and two people on houses, so some people have better guns and some people have better meds, and you can even out with your loot later. If you're forced to only loot the right side, I think you'll be at a disadvantage from the people who are on the left side, even though your chances of getting a really good sniper or scope are a little bit higher over here. I still would not recommend that as my first choice. As we move south, these buildings here are really good for one squad as well. This is a barn and two stories, which is really good. This is a garage building. This is a garage building. These 5 houses are really good. There's 2 unmarked houses here. There's these houses here. How I would split it up is have one person start here, one person start here. They go that way. This person goes up. This person loots here and goes south. And then you have your fourth person can pick anywhere between looting the Gaka radio, the observatory, which is really good with these 2 unmarked buildings, and some of Swamp. And then you guys can meet up with a car spawn on this road or on this road, and then you can move together from there. Not the greatest spot, but it's not bad if you have no other options and you see that George Pool is full and you're kind of pinched and you just need some early loot. We're going to head over now to Gatka, and there is a lot of loot here. One person obviously starts in the main city, one person on the east side with this little house here. Also, these barns west of Pochinki are very good loot. One person starts in the south side, and one person can either help loot one of these 3 areas or take this area below them. I wouldn't recommend this unless you're pretty experienced because this can be a difficult transition if you get run up on and you're not prepared to take a fight. 2 people can go Gatka or this east side. It's got pretty good loot for 4 people on those sections. Now we'll talk about Pochinki. Pochinki has a lot of opportunities. I would say only one team should really be here, but if you're forced to do 2, then there is a couple primary spots that I would recommend first. The first thing I would recommend is someone land on this building here. This building here has a lot of sight going this way, a lot of sight going this way, and a lot of sight going this way. This is a really good initial start point to see if there's anyone in your town and to call out what your teammates should avoid if there's enemies here. This building's on top of a hill, and this is a pretty good also loot drop spot. These double buildings have good loot to watch this way. I'd recommend someone dropping here. And the fourth person I'd recommend start over here and start working his way down. He's not so much of a scouter as he is a quick looter and tries to bring and call out extra guns to his team. This would be the first section I'd recommend one team to drop if there are 2. The second spot I would recommend is one person drop on this 3-story building, one person on this 3-story building, one person on this one, and then one person start in this corner. That way you have sight over all of Pochinki, including Church, and you can secure this whole south side road for your team without getting snuck up on. Now, if one person loots and there's not enough loot, one person goes down to this barn, one person over this compound. This has really amazing loot. Church is good, but also very exposed. It's a little high risk, high reward area. Again, that would be someone who's a little bit more experienced and very careful and has a quick shot, as you can get pinched there very easily. Still would really only recommend one person at Pochinki. We're going to move now to this section here, and this is what people refer to as country looting because you're not in a city, but there's still a lot of these country little complexes that you can loot. Now, if you have this whole area to yourself, I always have my team have one person drop here, one person drop here, one person drop here, and one person drop here. This fourth person can transition east or west to the next 2 compounds. This person should be able to get enough loot. If they need more loot, they head over here. This person can go grab this loot, and then if he still doesn't have enough, he goes to these barns here, and this person will meet up with his teammates. He should have enough loot from this compound just for himself to keep going and to take the next fight. So that is the first area in this section. The second section is what I call Milta West. This section here. Now there's still enough for 4 people here. One person would obviously drop here, one person here, one person here, and one person here. This gives you pretty good transitioning points, in which case everyone can get enough loot and again take your next fight. We're going to head west again, and this is a backup strategy I have in case you plan to do something and you see people there and you need to divert. I have one person drop here, one person drop here, 1 or 2 people drop here, and one person here. You can also drop at these compounds over here depending on exactly where you are. It really depends on the plane, but I'll go over that later. We're going to keep heading west before we do Milta, and this is what I call the West Coast loot strategy, which is very popular with some teams. As you're dropping, one person would drop here, one person would drop here and transition to this compound, one person would take these 12 houses here, and one person would take this compound here. Now, this gives you a lot of good loot suggestions. You have a lot of cars on this road. You're pretty safe from Primorsk. And then you have all these secondary loot spots in Swamp Town and up the coast and Quarry to give you just extra loot if you have time, if you're in the circle. This gets you very well geared as opposed to everyone else dropping on the map. Then, of course, you have Primorsk, which is a pretty standard town. One team can really loot this. If there's two, you both are going to have to fight over it. I always have one person drop Cafe and head north. I have one person drop Hangar and head south and loot this area. I have one person drop on these 2 houses here and loot this area. And I have one person start here and kind of loot down here, and then everyone kind of tries to meet up in the center here. The problem with Primorsk is access to a vehicle. You don't always get lucky, but you do have boats, and you can take that east or north if that is the worst case scenario that you have. This is what I like to call the South Shore. Now, if you're dropping and you have the area to yourself, I always have 2 people loot Fishing Town. I have one person loot West Fishing Town. I have one person loot this compound here, and one person this. This is kind of a backup. Usually this person goes here. If they want their own loot early, they can. I usually still like to have 2 people here because it's really big and you want to loot that and you want to get out pretty quickly. You don't want to stay along to there, especially if you're not in the circle. One person loots this side, one person this side, and this guy can go over and take these compounds here, which is pretty good loot. And this person can go join with his team and continue to loot that way or look for a vehicle. Now we can head over back to Milta, and there's a couple areas here I want to talk about. Milta being one city, the South Peninsula being another, the Milta Power being another, and we will start with Milta. Now Milta's got okay loot for a team. It's not the greatest, it's not the worst, but it's pretty good if there's no other option you have. One person starts in the hangar and loots east. One person starts at the south of the map, loots north. Can also take these buildings here. One person starts at this 2-story here and works in, and one person starts at the cafe here, and then they can loot south and hit these 3-story buildings, or they can go north depending on what his teammates are doing. I wouldn't go too far east or west or north because a lot of teams will be around you, and when you leave Milta, you should probably be grouped up. Now, if you see nobody over here, this is a great secondary loot spot, but this is also enough loot for just one team on their own if they couldn't make it to Milta. One team starts on this compound, one player starts on this one player starts on this one, and one player starts on this one and heads in. And you all want to kind of be in the center and look for a vehicle. This should give you plenty of loot to look for a fight. You should get 111 on your armor and gear, have at least one weapon per person that you can take a early fight and surprise somebody who might be in our next spot, which is the power plants. Now, I don't know why some teams like to drop 4 in either of these sections. These are not enough loot for everybody. I always have 2 people start here, 1 person on this building, and 1 person starting on this side going this way, and this person goes this way, the 2 people here. And then I have 2 people here, 1 person starts on the first floor and 1 person on the top floor. They loot that, and then they can transition this way, and these people can transition this way and loot these extra buildings on the side. Again, you want to stay paired with your teammates with a buddy system because you might run into other people who are doing the secondary loot spawns as yourself. As we head south, we are going to talk about Novo. I think Novo is underutilized. People can get here from a boat or from a car, but let's assume you have the whole side to yourself. If you do have 4 people and you're early, this is what I find to be the best loot scenario to be optimal for the 4 to 5 minutes you have until the next circle. 1 person starts on the north side crates and heads south. 1 person starts on the south side crates and heads north and meets this guy in the middle. Then you have another teammate who starts at these houses and works his way down, and you have 1 teammate start at this barn, these other high priority loots, and then meets up in the middle as well. The houses should be done early, in which they head in from this direction, and the people on the crate should be on this side, heading in this direction, allowing you to get as much of the loot and comb through the city as possible. Now, this is important because the crates have higher chances of better weapons and scopes, and you want people on this, but they don't have a lot of meds, which is why you have people on the near this in the houses looting a lot more meds. I've seen some teams have a person do this section. I don't recommend that because from my experience, it takes 4 people to loot all of Novo if you're not in the circle before the timer runs out. There's no point in diversifying your assets that much that early. If you get beat to Novo and you don't want to fight, this is actually a really good loot spot for your team. 1 person starts on this compound and heads immediately away from Novo. 1 person starts on this side and heads in. 1 person can try to get to the observatory radio station here and head up, and 1 person can try to loot this and head in. And then you can control this area, which allows you to camp the bridge or transition quickly or camp the people from Novo or military with eyes on them before they see you. This is a good loot spot for just one whole team themselves. And then we have, of course, the military base, which I'm sure everyone knows has a lot of loot. Now, I don't need to tell you too many strategies because I'm pretty sure everyone knows that there's loot everywhere. But let's say you have one team that drops here and it's uncontested. I have 1 person start at the ACT tower and head north to this factory. I have 1 person start at these warehouses and head into this office building here. I have 1 person start on the dorms and head this way, and I have another person start at the dorm and head this way, and this guy will wrap around to these hangars. This is a little risky. If there is another team and you're not sure, I've always gotten a lot of kills from people running up here. You're very exposed. There's not a lot of cover. If you don't have a scope, you're pretty dead, and everyone has a pretty good chance. I would try to loot the whole area and then have a person loot this area with someone covering him. It's got great loot, but it's just a little risky in the beginning if you're not sure if you're alone. If there's 2 teams here, this is how I would break up the military base so you guys can both get loot and get out without having to lose teammates. 1 person starts in this village here. 2 people start in this factory with 1 person taking the tower, and 1 person can try to sneak this building here and then immediately head east to the hangars down here. Now, if the other team drops, they have applicable loot on this side. They don't have to take a fight. They don't need to. 2 of them will probably drop on these barracks. 1 person will drop on the radio tower, and 1 person will drop on these office buildings here and take these hangars. Now, you both will have around the same amount of loot. It's really up to you if you think you're strong enough to take the other team out. Obviously, if you get a pick or a down and you want to move with that, that makes sense. I find that I never like taking an early fight. It's just not worth losing a teammate if you win the fight and all of the other team is dead. Now, if you wanted to drop military base, but you saw already 2 teams, I would not recommend going there. This would be my backup strategy for military base. You notice that there's 2 teams going military, so you immediately veer off. You have 1 person take this, 1 person take this, 1 person take this, and 1 person take this building. And then you can head here or to the bridge and look for an early assault and catch them off guard. Now, if the plane's a little bit more east, you can do the exact same thing and just focus on these compounds, 1 person here, 1 person here, 1 person here. possibly one up here, or two people can loot this. It's not the greatest amount of loot, but it is better than nothing. There are boat spawns on this beach down here, and you can use those to get away and get back to the island, and avoid the bridge with a little bit amount of loot and try to loot some secondary areas. Now, I believe that covers all the areas I know that people can loot, and as you can see, there's more than 30 loot spots on this whole map for teams to split and loot. I hope I have given you some new ideas, some things to try out. Please give me some feedback. I'd like to give a big thank you to Bransta at PUBG Online for giving me this opportunity to make this video. I'd also love to hear what you guys have to say. If you want to give me any comments or have any more questions, um, feel free to leave it in the section below and I will get back to you, and hopefully I can create the second video to whatever the most popular comments were. Um, I'll see you guys next week.